One of the fun things I used to do with my congregation when I was pastoring at Christmas was a Christmas quiz that basically showed us how much we think we know about the Christmas story, but how much we actually have wrong. A lot of us don't realize that that nice little nativity scene that we set up at Christmas is so inaccurate in so many ways. And so I like to bring out the quiz, which would ask about what the scriptures actually say, what the historical context actually was. And so you could see how different our traditions are from what actually probably happened. And so I'm going to put a link to the full quiz down below. It's got a couple pages of questions. There's like 25 multiple choice and a dozen true false. And then it's got all the answers at the end, so you can actually see where the answers come from and why they are what they are. And how many different ways that we've let songs and traditions and just what other people say influence and show us how we get it mixed up. A good example of that, we often see Christmas cards and pictures showing Joseph walking along the road with Mary on a donkey, just the two of them, no one else around, all by themselves, going from Nazareth to Bethlehem for to do the census. There we go. Come on, brain. What we don't realize is they didn't travel that way. When they traveled on roads at that time, they wouldn't travel by themselves. They traveled in large groups, partially for safety, so that way they didn't have to worry about robbers and so forth coming in and harassing them as they were all by themselves. So safety played a big part of it. They would travel with people they knew. They allowed them to pool supplies. And if you're kind of like, well, I don't see that in the Bible. Actually, you do, because it's exactly why 12 years later, when they're returning from Jerusalem up to Nazareth, and it takes them a couple days to realize that Jesus isn't with them. Where's Jesus? Why did they lose him? How could they lose him if they were traveling by themselves? It's because they were in this large group and they assumed that Jesus was with other people in the group, and it took them a couple days. Hey, Jesus isn't hanging with you. Wait a minute. Why isn't he with you? We thought he was with you. He's not with us. Uh-oh. That's why it took a couple days. Because the group was big enough, it was easy to lose him in it, but just assume he's there. So they didn't travel by themselves. Whether she was on a donkey or not is also questionable. It's possible, absolutely. But it's also possible she walked. It's also possible Joseph was a carpenter. He would have known how to build a cart. It's possible he built a cart, and then she rode in that. I don't know how smooth of a ride that would have been either, but it is a possibility. There's multiple ones. The Bible doesn't say anything. Another good example of how we get the whole Bible story wrong is the story of the innkeeper. This grouchy, grumpy man who's just like, there's no room in the inn. Rah, 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 rah. Except when you actually read the scriptures, there's no innkeeper. In fact, it's highly questionable whether there was even an inn in Bethlehem. Bethlehem was not a big town. Depending upon who you look to, estimates are it was between 200 and 500 people. Not very big. It's also only about 10 miles from Jerusalem. So if they're traveling to Jerusalem or from Jerusalem, it's not very far on the road. They would have either waited till they got to Jerusalem to stop, or they would have been continuing on past it. It wasn't in a spot that people would have stopped. Little town, not in a place to stop. It wouldn't have had an inn. There was no reason for it to have an inn. So wait a minute. But the scripture says that there was no room at the inn. So this is actually going to be one time I'm going to tell you, one of the few, that the translation there is bad. It's a bad translation. Because there's another word that should have been put in there, but it got translated that way back in King James, and it's become tradition, and people are almost afraid to actually translate it correctly. So the Greek word that's translated as in there is kataluma, and it basically only shows up like 3 other times in the scripture. One of those times it says guest room. The other 2 times it's translated as upper room. Upper room? Upper room? Yes, that upper room. What it actually refers to is the room on top of the house. The houses were all flat roofed, and they would use the top of the house. They put like a brush arbor or cover over it, and during the summer, that was the cool spot to be. It's also where they would put the guests, and so they would kind of enclose it in if it was not great weather. So the upper room, when they did the Passover meal, was on a roof in an enclosed area up on top. It's where they put guests. That's what it's referring to, is the guest room, the extra room, the room that was used for people to visit or special events. It's the top of the house. So when they come to wherever they're going and they get told there's no room in the Ketaluma, the guest room, the upper room, it's not an inn. Wait, but so you got this town that wouldn't have an inn, and it doesn't. And the translators have just stuck with tradition, because if they translate that one wrong, everybody's going to be going, but the truth is, there was no inn. So whose guest room are they going to? Well, if you remember, way back in Luke 2, it says that Joseph actually was returning to his home city and where his family and ancestors were from. So it's got 2 different verses there. 2:2, I believe it is, says he was traveling back to his home city. And then 2:3 is the one that talks about the home of his ancestors. So Joseph at some point lived in Bethlehem. His family roots are there. They've got relatives there. This is where they're going. So when they come back, they're going to family. Maybe it was his parents. Maybe it was aunts and uncle. Maybe it was cousins. But this is family. And he gets there, and their guest room, the upper room, is full because of the census and other family members coming in. They don't have a place in the house to put them. So where do they put them? They put them with the animals. Now, a manger is actually a feeding trough. That's how we know that they're in with animals. But it's not a barn. It's not a wood structure. It's either the courtyard, entry courtyard of their home. So it's possible they were out in the front. But in the Bethlehem area, there are a lot of caves. And a cave is a very normal place to put the animals. Very likely there was a cave right by the house. They had a door on it. And so where they actually end up, more than likely, is a cave right nearby. And that is where Mary has her child. Again, not alone. They've got family. They're staying with family. There's midwives there. There's aunts and uncles and cousins and all sorts of other people. Joseph is probably told by all these grannies, go boil water. We're going to take care of Mary. And they're the ones that provide the swaddling clothes and are taking care of them. So they're not alone. There's people there. There's family there, which is a very different view than we often get. And, we're kind of like, well, why would God leave them alone? He didn't. He put them in a loving family environment that would take care of them and provide for them and meet every need that they had. In fact, it's very likely when the wise men show up 2 years later, and it says that they went to the house, it's very likely that they were actually still staying with family in a room in the family home. It could be a room that had been there already, but it was also a very normal Jewish thing that if you've got somebody who's getting married or family move in, you add a room onto the house for them. And you just build it on the side of the courtyard. And you can actually see these homes where you have the original courtyard, and there's all these rooms added all over the place to it that they've done for family. So they're probably staying in the family home with an add-on that they had made for it. That's who they're with. Little different view of what's actually going on, but it's the historical reality, and it's actually fits in better with the scriptures than what we often think of as the Christmas story. There's a lot of things that we kind of mix up a little bit. We mix up the shepherds and the wise men and who the wise men were and where they came from and what they did. And we don't know what their gifts are. And so this quiz I've got is going to go through all of those little things for you. It's just a fun little way to celebrate the holiday, to learn a little bit about the scriptures and the Christmas story. It's a lot of fun. Like I said, I did it with my congregation every year. And it's one of those things that I'll be honest, I would take it myself every year, and I usually still missed one question. And I'm the one that helped compile it from different sources. So I hope you have a lot of fun with it. Take some time, enjoy it as a family, or take it to your congregation Sunday school group. Have some fun, be blessed, learn a little bit, and have a wonderfully blessed Christmas. Thank you so incredibly much for watching. God bless.